See what happens when you're civically engaged, when you're paying attention to what's going on in your backyard? You get big wins like last night. Good morning. Happy Hump Day Wednesday. It is great to have you here on KCMO 95.7 FM. It was 1:30 in the morning. That's right. When the Lenexa City Council came back and voted down by a 5-2 vote the homeless shelter proposal at I-35 and 95th Street. Woo! Now, this is not about being anti-homeless. It never has been. It is about whether or not that location and that spot is the best spot to put a homeless shelter, a low-barrier homeless shelter, where you could have people getting dropped off, no questions asked, not certain on whether or not, forget them being Johnson County residents, but American citizens. And it really felt like a cram down from the Johnson County Commission. And thankfully, Lenexa City Council had enough backbone to stand up for its own citizens and say, you know what, this actually doesn't work for us. This is not in the best interests of our constituents, of our taxpayers. And they voted this down last night 5-2. So it came in the early morning hours, and it looks like it's all but done. It's not going to happen. And it went into the early morning hours last night. So I can't imagine we'll have a lot of folks who were there last night checking in at 6:07 in the morning, but it is going to be one of our top stories today here on KCMO 95.7 FM. Now, what is the statement that has been put out since then by the mayor, Julie Sayers? Julie Sayers putting out a statement after the vote saying, quote, on behalf of the Lenexa professional staff, the Planning Commission, and the governing body, I hope our message is not one of failure by the applicant or rejection by our team, but rather a chance to learn from this process on how all relevant stakeholders in Johnson County can work together to find a county-wide solution to the problem of homelessness. Our hope is that other cities in the county will adopt codes to accommodate homeless shelters similar to ours, so that options for appropriate properties throughout the county will become available for consideration. My goodness, what a bunch of feel-good mumbo-jumbo that is. I hope this is not viewed as a failure, but rather a chance to learn for all the relevant stakeholders. I don't care what you want to call it, ma'am. I'll just call it this, a win for the Lenexa residents. And not just a win for the Lenexa residents, it's a win for Johnson County residents. Because this cockamamie idea conjured up by the Johnson County Commission was already going to spend $10 million on this property to turn this into a homeless shelter. That is county-wide tax dollars. That's everybody in Johnson County who was going to foot that bill. And then, had Lenexa approved this, the county was going to go with its hand out to every city council in Johnson County and say, you chip in $100,000 a year, you chip in $100,000 a year to Overland Park and Olathe, but all the way down the line to some of the smallest counties or the smallest cities in Johnson County to say, you chip in a few bucks as well. And you know as well as I do it was never going to end. The bill was never going to go down. The bill was only going to go up. So the Lenexa City Council stood up for all Johnson County taxpayers. And I know the mayor, who apparently is pretty woke, has got to spin this thing and to say, well, this is not about rejecting homeless people. It's just about figuring out best plans and best procedures countywide. Whatever, fine. Whatever makes you sleep at night, I guess works for you, Mayor Sayers. But all I know is this. All I care about, and all any of us should care about, is it safe? Is it in the best location possible? And is it in the best interests of the taxpayers? And if you cannot answer yes to all of those questions, you should not move forward. And there was no way to answer yes to all of those questions last night. And that's why the Lenexa Planning Commission, on a 9-0 vote, recommended the city council not move ahead with this deal. So this is a big step in the right direction, and it's what we've talked about for a long time. Many of you say, hey, I don't know what's going on here locally outside of this show. And I appreciate you saying that, but I like to think that when it comes to helping you know what's going on in your backyard, yes, we talk about, obviously, Trump, Harris, all the national news and politics, and that obviously is a big part of this show, especially when you're 48 days to an election. But we are never going to lose sight of stuff like this, because it's stories like this, it's situations and issues like this that ultimately can play, not will necessarily, but can play a much larger role in your day-to-day life than Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. I mean, if you live in this part of town, this would have a major impact. If you own a business in this part of town, this would play a major impact in your bottom line, more so than maybe tweaking your tax rates by 2 or 3%. Same thing in Jackson County, obviously, with the crime issue and what's going on there. So these are the people that we need to get to know at our very local levels, because they're the ones who are trying to dramatically change and impact what's going on in our backyards. And without you doing the heavy lifting, we're just, a messenger here. But without many of you in Lenexa doing the heavy lifting to stand up for your city and stand up for your community, who knows how this goes? If this had not gotten this level of attention, who knows? City Council might have ramrodded this thing through, and we'd all be sitting here saying, wait, they're doing what? Wait, that La Quinta's turning into what, John? What?
Yeah, you're right about keeping track of elected officials. I'm also interested in any letter with "we the undersigned." As well, personally.
Yeah, the faith leaders who came out in favor of this deal.
Well, it happens all the time. We came out of COVID. Oh, we the undersigned. The Russian. Oh, we the undersigned.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yep.
Right? So keep track of those as well,
Absolutely.
Let's keep the receipts, I guess, is the word. Is that what you kids say nowadays?
Yeah. Is that what us kids say, Mark? Are we still kids as millennials pushing the big 4-0?
Oh, yeah. We're keeping the receipts.
Okay.
The age disparity between all of us here never closes. It's the same.
It is always the same.
Anyway.
This is such a great win. It is. You should be patting yourself on the back there in Lenexa if you were part of this. And if you're someone in, let's say, Gardner or Olathe or Overland Park, and you bump into somebody from Lenexa who was engaged in this whole deal, buy him a coffee this morning. I'd say buy him a beer, but it's a little early. Maybe it's not too early. I don't know. Maybe you spent the whole night on a bender celebrating this
Johnny's
news.
Made a tradition out of it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Go out on K10. Go to one of the local ones here. There's a bunch of them in the metro, and go have a good time. 913-408-7957. That is how you join us this morning on the phones, on the text line here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. As always, we are streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. I knew it was coming on the text line. Pete, I'm glad you're celebrating human beings remaining homeless.
Such a nice man.
I knew it was coming. It was only a matter of time. Yep.
Right?
That's right.
You got to convert the garage here, buddy?
Hey, 0453. Right. Give us a call. We'll tell the homeless to come to your house tonight, okay? All right, champ? Or should I say chump? Unbelievable. Just keep that yard sign loud and proud. In this house, we believe. Well, I do nothing about it.
You charged up to plant your moral superiority flag is actually just an anthill.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is not about being against the homeless. Come on now. Do I have to use the City Union Mission example? 100 years operating here in Kansas City, never a dime from the public sector, and one of the best homeless shelters in the entire Midwest. We should use our monies and our resources and our time, if available, to help the homeless. The government spending millions of dollars on a 50-bed shelter in the horrible location that was being proposed is a terrible idea. And that is not celebrating human beings being homeless. Nice try. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the entire administration are serious about turning down the political rhetoric. I don't. And I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's just like listening to the words that they say. Like yesterday, White House press briefing, taking place. Karine Jean-Pierre, of course, is the White House spokesperson, and she said something about Donald Trump being a threat. Now, you would think 2 days after the guy is potentially assassinated for the second time in 60-some-odd days, if you were serious about toning down rhetoric, you wouldn't call your political opponent a threat, right? Like, even if you were pretending to tone down the rhetoric and just saying it for the sake of saying it, you wouldn't use words like threat to describe your political opponent. Just something that I would think would make sense. But here was Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday.
Just to clarify, so you're saying that the president and vice president believe that former President Donald Trump should be toning down his rhetoric?
So I'll say this. President Biden has been clear-eyed about the threat that the former president represents to our democracy. He's been clear-eyed about that.
The threat that he presents to our democracy. This is all they've got. When you don't have any real policy to stand on, you have to keep going back to the well with this ridiculous threat to democracy BS. And as a result, it can radicalize some people. But this is the world we live in. If somebody who, has ever purchased a piece of MAGA gear does something that is perceived to be, or is, God forbid, somewhat violent in nature, it's Donald Trump's fault. However, in this case, when you have one side of the political aisle talking about one man who has been president and has a 50-50 chance of being the next president, and refer to him as a threat and a threat to democracy, you can say that all day, every day. And when there are 2 assassination attempts against that individual in a 60-day window, nobody's responsible. It's amazing. Nobody has to answer for it. Instead, you can just keep saying it and saying it and saying it and insist that, no, he's a threat, so what I'm saying is true. Therefore, there is no inciting going on here. I'm just telling you the truth. It's amazing how that works. So Peter Doocy of Fox News is asked about this, or gets a chance to ask Karine Jean-Pierre about this yesterday after she calls Donald Trump once again a threat and says, when are you going to knock that stuff off? And the answer is just quintessential victimization. Take a listen.
How dare you?
2 days since somebody allegedly tried to kill Donald Trump again. And you're here at the podium in the White House briefing room calling him a threat. How many more assassination attempts on Donald Trump until the president and the vice president and you pick a different word to describe Trump other than threat?
Peter, if anything from this administration...
Peter. Sounds like my mother when I was a kid. That's what it sounds like. Karine Jean-Pierre. Oh, Peter, I'm so disappointed in you, little Peter.
I actually completely disagree with the premise of your question, the question that you're asking. It is also incredibly dangerous.
The question's dangerous. Your question is dangerous. Karine Jean-Pierre just says to Peter Doocy. He says, hey, how many more assassination attempts do we have to have against Trump until you pick a different word other than threat to describe him? Your question's dangerous. These people, they have no freaking shame. No shame whatsoever. You've got to be freaking kidding me with that. Hey, can you stop calling the guy a threat who has been nearly killed twice in the last 60 days? Your question's dangerous. What's wrong with you? My goodness.
The way that you're asking it.
The way.
Because American people are watching.
Oh.
And to say that from an administration who has consistently condemned political violence, from an administration where the president called the former president and was grateful that he was okay, from an administration who has called out January 6th, called out the attack of Paul Pelosi, called out and said we need to lower the temperature after the Butler incident. And now for you to make that kind of comment in your question, because your question involved a comment and a statement. And, it is, that is also incredibly dangerous.
She's a real beauty.
Wow, John.
It's called journalism.
Yeah.
Look into it, KJP.
Yeah, that would be nice.
The question still remains once you're done with your little speech, running up the high ground, plant your moral flag.
Playing the victim card.
Yeah.
Oh!
Shame on you.
How dare you ask me such a question? It's a legitimate question. And notice how, you can't give an answer while planting that flag on the moral high ground without mentioning January 6th. I'm pretty sure that's a requirement now if you're in the role of Karine Jean-Pierre. Playing the victim card has to include references to January 6th. You have no other choice.
Well, they mentioned Paul Pelosi.
Yes.
They were inclusive.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is as ridiculous an answer as KJP has given during her time as White House press secretary, which, by the way, is saying something, I will add as well.
Right.
Like, there is no shortage of Hall of Fame quotes from this White House press secretary. And that one is right up there with the best or the worst of them, depending how you want to look at it. To sit there and say, oh, well, we condemn all political violence. And Joe Biden called Donald Trump after his ear was blown off. I mean, yeah, as he should have. Okay, great. Good. What do you want? A sticker? Like Claire came home yesterday with a little sticker because she did a good job in her speech class? What do you want for that? That's what decent leaders do. When your political opponent comes within a quarter inch of losing his life, you call him. It's like, oh, we called Trump. Okay, but now you're back to the same old dog and pony show using the same kind of rhetoric and the same kind of language. And don't get me wrong, the rhetoric can be toned down across the political aisle. I don't deny that. I will give you that. If you're texting in right now and that's your take, fine, I'll give you that. But there's only one guy who's nearly been shot at twice in the last 60 days. And while the ultimate person responsible is always the potential shooter, you would think that it would be a chance of some kind of self-reflection to say, you know what, I guess we could do a little bit of a better job here. And we'll be the leaders. We'll lead the way. But now, the first one in July was like, okay, there was at least a pretending of toning it down. Now it's more like, no. There's 40 some odd days to the election. If you want us to tone it down, you're a threat to democracy.
The tone down lasted a news cycle, basically, about 48 hours.
Yes, it was about 2 days. 2 days, if any. Jim's on KCMO. What's up, Jim? Go ahead.
Well, Pete, she forgot to mention about all the threats against our Supreme Court justices, too, didn't she?
Oh, yeah. It's funny how those were conveniently forgotten. Paul Pelosi got a mention, fair. January 6th got a mention, fair. But anything on the other side of the political aisle seems to be just forgotten.
Oh, that's right, because it's not political violence on the other side.
Correct. That's you. You are, boy, you're a quick learner there, Jim. You really are, my man. Well done. 913-408-7957. That's our studio line and our text line here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. As always, we are streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. And it is truly amazing when you see how this most recent assassination attempt, that obviously was not nearly as serious as the first one, but guess what? It can't get more serious than the first one. The only way it's more serious than the first one, Donald Trump's not here today. And the way the second one has been downplayed as, well, I mean, no one pulled a trigger. If that's your approach, if that's your take this morning, this week, then you have completely missed the boat on this deal. 913-408-7957. We will get to you coming up. We've got much more updates from what's happening at area city council meetings. Incredibly important stuff just after 7:05 on 95.7 FM KCMO.
Just to clarify, so you're saying that the president and vice president believe that former President Donald Trump should be toning down his rhetoric?
So I'll say this. President Biden has been clear-eyed about the threat that the former president represents to our democracy.
The threat to the democracy. He's been very clear about the threat to the democracy. That was Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday, Peter Doocy calling her out, and somehow they're always the victims. Always the victims. Listening to that is like listening to my two oldest, 5 and 3.5, argue with each other about nonsense. That's what I hear there. And they're always trying to figure out why the other one's wrong when the reality is they're both wrong. But when you're 3 years old or you're 5.5 going on 6, it's never your fault. That's what I hear from Karine Jean-Pierre. Don't blame us for our rhetoric. I mean, if Trump gets back in office, he's never leaving. And here's the thing, like, I have Democrats in my life, family, friends, and there are some of them, and I don't usually talk politics with them because, like, what's the point, right? I don't let this stuff impact my personal relationships. If I've been friends with somebody for 20 years, I don't throw that out the window over politics. And to their credit, they don't either, at least not yet. But some of them actually like believe that. Like they don't think Trump will leave the White House if he gets back in there. And it's genuine. And to me, that is just Trump derangement on steroids is what that is. So they actually believe it. And there's nothing you can say that can convince them otherwise, which is, incredibly concerning to me. But I'm just telling you, like, that does exist. And it's more mainstream than many people on the other side might ultimately realize. Mike's in Kansas City. He's on KCMO. What's up, Mike?
Yeah, don't forget, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. There are a lot of people in the Democratic Party and on the left that considered both those guys heroes. And if you watched Hillary's talk yesterday, the poison that she had in her voice against Trump, he has to be stopped at all costs. He has to be silenced at all costs. That's not exactly a democratic, a small d statement. That's not what you do in a democracy. Democracy is open. Mm-hmm. And ideas to thrive or fail on their merit. You don't sit there and silence your opposition, either by courts or cancel culture, or in this case here by bullets. Mm. I mean, it's funny watching this off to the side. And I'm around people who migrated
what I would
here
say,
legally.
What I would say, Mike, is that when it comes to, some of the crazy stuff you see on cable news, Hillary Clinton and others, and Hillary was on MSNBC talking about, how dangerous Donald Trump is literally 2 nights ago, the day after there's another assassination attempt against him. Most of us normal people just roll our eyes, right? And we're like, come on, are you kidding me? Like, what are you doing, Hillary? I know you're trying to win an election. I get it. You're still mad about 2016, but, like, what are you doing?
Speaking about relitigating elections.
Yeah, you ain't kidding, right? But in a country of 330 million people, there are wackos out there, like real wackos. And while everyone is responsible for their own actions, that's indisputable, people of power, people in power, people with big microphones do have a responsibility to just at least deal in facts and less hyperbolic opinions. And that's what you're getting way too much of right now. Way too much of it. I mean, this guy down in Florida from the other day, he was a wacko. He was a weirdo. Guy lived with a horse. He literally had a horse in his house. I don't know if you saw that report last night. His Ryan Routh, he had a 1,000-pound horse in his home. It was a freak. But it's the freaks who ultimately end up oftentimes, being the ones who do dangerous, stupid things. As we approach 7 o'clock on KCMO, I will tell you just a little bit of what happened at the Olathe City Council meeting for this wild proposal down at 119th and Renner, where they want to put a freaking amusement park. It's just unbelievably dumb. I can't believe that idea is actually being floated out there. I had a conversation with someone on the city council about that. I will tell you about just after the top of the hour. Early this morning, to bring it back here to the local level, the Lenexa City Council voted down this controversial homeless shelter proposal at I-35 and 95th Street. That was going to be at the La Quinta Inn and Suites. It was a 5-2 vote. It came down at 1:29 this morning. So, very early this morning that came down, and that is a big win for Johnson County taxpayers. It's not anti-homeless. It's pro-taxpayer to vote this thing down and figure out a better way to do it. Travis is in Lenexa. He was there on KCMO. He's had his coffee. Travis, what'd you take out of last night?
Well, I took out of last night, it was kind of interesting to me because you had local media. So let's back up to yesterday's conversation we had with the Good Faith Network. So the Good Faith Network showed up in a large force, is what I would call it. They had their signs, and they were handing out signs. And it seemed like the crowd was either, are you for or against the homeless shelter? That's not what last night's meeting was. It was to approve a special use permit. So it was frustrating when you had the local media coverage to include NPR trying to get sound bites out of someone like myself asking, are you for or against it? And I told them, this has to do with the special use permit, and they were confused. They seemed confused, and it was like I was educating them about what was going on. Last night had nothing to do if you were for or against a homeless shelter. It was all about where this homeless shelter was going to go and the fact that it was not in a great place to put it. That was what this bottom line was, and the fact that Lenexa wasn't willing to take on the burden. It was risk versus reward at the end of it.
Well, you know as well as I do, those hacks at NPR just wanted to portray you and others as being anti-homeless.
Yeah, and I didn't fall into it. You know what I did? I offered. I told them I've reached out to you guys and said I would gladly do a full-on interview. And I offered it again this morning to them, and they just ignored it. So they didn't want to do an actual interview where they asked questions where I provided facts versus, all this nonsense that the county was trying to put out. Stephanie Boyer last night was fumbling around at the end whenever the council, after they were done with the public hearing, the city council was asking her questions, and it was about mitigating her own strategy for implementing this.
Oh, is she the head? She's the head of Restart? Or who is
Correct.
Stephanie Boyer? Head of Restart?
She's CEO of Restart. So whenever she was doing her questions, handling her questions before the city council was going to vote, she was all over the map, and she wasn't even being like the plan that she submitted. She was changing in her mind as she was coming into it. They were asking questions. She would giggle and then didn't have answers. Okay, so that was when there was a joke, and then she didn't. These were simple questions. Originally, there was supposed to be a barrier around the whole thing, and then she came back when she was presenting that there wasn't going to be a barrier all around it. They weren't going to accept walk-ins. Well, now she was going to accept walk-ins. So there was no way the plan was going to go through, and the city council didn't see through it.
Thank you very much there for the update, Travis. I know you're a busy guy. We appreciate you checking in, and good job staying up till 1 a.m.
All right. Thanks, Pete.
All right. There you go. It was 1:29 in the morning, according to Chris Ketz, Channel 9 KMBC, when the 5-2 vote came down in Lenexa to deny the special use permit to move forward with that homeless shelter at the La Quinta Inn and Suites on I-95 or I-35 and 95th Street. So that was 1:29 in the morning that came down, a 5-2 vote. So it wasn't all that close. Of course, the Planning Commission a few weeks ago on a 9-0 vote recommended against the special use permit being used for that location to become a homeless shelter. And it's a credit to you, the Lenexa voter, did your job. You, the Lenexa resident, stayed engaged, had your voice heard, and pushed back. Not because you're anti-homeless. You must hate the homeless. No, because that location stunk to high heaven. The location was awful. The cost to the taxpayer was in the tens of millions, literally $10 million from the county commission. The city was going to be kicking in a lot of money, and they were going to be asking every single city in Johnson County to help chip in for a 50-room location, John.
It wasn't a standard homeless shelter. That's what I want to reiterate. The low barrier part, right?
Yeah. It was a low barrier homeless
they say
shelter.
They don't have to ask where you're from.
Nope.
These people wouldn't even necessarily, as you point out, be from Lenexa or even Johnson County.
Or even American citizens. No questions.
So it's the low barrier part. It's as much about it to me as just building a shelter somewhere.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. And where are they going to go? Hang out at the Quick Trip across the street? take a walk down the Oak Park Mall. I mean, everything about it was just an awful idea. And at least for now, it has been quashed. Now, the other big city council meeting that we were following last night took place in Olathe. In Olathe, they were looking at, it was very early in the process, but what they were doing in Olathe was hearing from the public on this development proposal at 119th and Renner. They want to put in, the Ferris wheel. They want to put in a little roller coaster. I mean, it's not going to be worlds of fun, but they want to put in like 20 rides. They want to, put in stuff for indoor sporting events, outdoor ice skating rink. They want to have 8-acre theme park with a sensory village for the disabled, 6-story, 150-room hotel, restaurants, the whole deal. That's what they want to do.
This is the new trend after you build a hotel with the convention facilities.
Oh, yeah.
We've got one of those now at every exit here.
I think we do as well.
Now we have the mini amusement park or something there.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's like they think that if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
No, there's really not a demand for more of this as far as I can tell. There's plenty of hotel space on the east side of 35 there at 119th. But, hey, just build another one. That'll look great. So last night was the first opportunity for the public to weigh in on this at the Olathe City Council meeting. And if you were there, I really want to hear from you on the text line or on the phones at 913-408-7957. But I did, in due diligence, speak to a couple members of the city council last night. And they both reiterated to me that, hey, this is very early in the process. They've got to apply for their STAR bonds. They want a STAR bond district out of this, the developers. So we're a ways away from this actually happening. And these proposals always change over time. They're never as grandiose as people think they're going to be, blah, 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 blah. But you know what I thought was interesting? Because I just got these council members on the phone, multiple, and I asked them, I said, hey, where are you at on this? And what did they immediately go to? Multiple members of the council. They jumped to, well, this park for the disabled is, oh my goodness, I mean, there's nothing else like it. Who's against the disabled? This is just fantastic. We need something like this. Disabled people deserve to have fun as well. And I'm like, stop. Just stop. Stop with this guilting me over disabled people thing. Just for a second. I said, how much of this project, I asked the folks I talked to, how much of this project is actually for the disabled? And they both ballparked about a third. I said, okay, so that's a third of it. There's 2/3 of the project that has nothing to do with the disabled. So let's talk about that. Don't lean into the, oh boy, trying to guilt me over, well, if you're not for this, I mean, you must just hate disabled people. I mean, that's the only conclusion to come to. Stop. That is such disingenuous nonsense. No, I'm looking at 119th and Renner, right off 35. And as someone who has spent quite a bit of time in that area, I'm wondering how you're going to make that work. And I'm wondering, is putting a mini amusement park right there, plop it right off of 35, right off of 119th Street, is that really the best plan when you have a lot of residential within a quarter to a half a mile? So people can now sit on their back porch and hear the woo, as they're going off the roller coasters. Whee! Is that really in the best interest of the people who have already invested in your community? Not those who are trying to make a buck, not those who are trying to leverage their local power to get STAR bond dollars, by the way, the scam that thing is, to then turn around and profit, which, by the way, I'm not against business profiting, but when the government's in the business of picking winners and losers, which STAR bonds basically do, we've got a problem. Are you looking out? Do these city council members even care about the residents they currently have? Or is it just about the bottom line and trying to get more residents and more hotel space and more apartment units? What's it really about? And when the council members that I spoke to last night in Olathe went down that road of like, well, and they made it all about the disabled park, I said, hey, just my opinion here. I think we're all for having a little park for the disabled. That sounds really nice. You get a lot of green space. You build a park for the disabled. That sounds really nice. But that's not what we're actually talking about here. The proposal is not for a disability park. The proposal, at least based on what's been reported, is talking about, roller coasters. Is talking about developing between both sides of the street, like up to 132 acres, a carousel, a Dumbo-like ride, a zip line, and a Ferris wheel. And unless that zip line is going directly to the front door of Joe's KC on the other side of 35, I'm not interested. And I would imagine that many in Olathe would also not be interested in that right in their backyard. 913-408-7957 is the studio line and also the text line here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We are streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app, so that's in the very early phases. And here's the other thing that multiple council members brought up to me on this project. Well, the Hunt family's behind it. Now, I love the Chiefs. Go to a lot of games, support the team, spend my money. Lamar Hunt Jr. has been on this show. He's a big supporter of veterans. Mark Donovan, president of the Chiefs, has been on this show. We've had a lot of people tied to the Chiefs on this show. And we love what they bring to this community. But that is irrelevant when it comes to making a decision on a project like this at 119th and Renner. Why should who's behind it matter? Now, I get it. I'm not naive. I understand it does politically. But in terms of evaluating the project for what it is, the family or the group that's behind it is irrelevant. I mean, it should be. It's either a good idea for the community or it's a bad idea. Who's funding it and who the developer is should not matter, at least if you're being an honest broker of the proposal itself. And thinking that that's the case anymore in too many of these proposals around the entire Kansas City metro is a fool's errand. 913-408-7957. Charlotte O'Hara is going to be here, Johnson County Commissioner, at 8:05 to react to the early morning decision in Lenexa. So that's coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, as always. We're streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Mark, you heard the advice from Bill O'Reilly. Stop with the cat memes. Stop talking about Fluffy and the Cocker Spaniels, okay? Stop sending me this stuff.
I know. I just saw that photo from the New York, whatever that was, and I just thought it had to be a meme. Nobody put it into a meme yet. I had to send it to you guys.
New York Post headline, 38-pound rescue cat Crumbs gets stuck in shoe rack while trying to escape from fat camp. Meal for a family of 10 in Springfield. Stop with that, Mark. Stop with the... Come on. We said enough of that. All right. Speaking about enough of that, how about Howard Stern? He's still around. He's still doing a radio show, John. Can you believe it?
Howard Stern, MTV, the Clintons, MySpace, Tamagotchi pets, grunge rock, Pogs, things that were last relevant in the 90s.
Mark's fist pumping, his emo haircut.
Beanie Babies.
Beanie Babies. There we go. I knew we were missing something. Boy bands.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Howard Stern is still doing a radio show on Sirius XM, and he said something this week that has gone viral. He said here, I don't hate Trump. I hate the people who vote for him. I think they are stupid. I do. I have no respect for them. Stern added, I'm at the end of my career, so F you, and listen to another station if you don't like my views on Trump. Now, it's so interesting because my approach is totally different. I sit here and I think to myself, man, like I know the majority of our audience feels the way I do. We may differ on some things, and that's what makes the world go round, and we have that conversation here on KCMO. But I also see the text line. Unfortunately, not as many of these folks call in, but I see the text line. And there's plenty of you that vehemently disagree. And you text in with some regularity. And, when you're trying to make a coherent point, I appreciate that. When you're just calling names, I'm not as interested. But my thought is, man, that's great. I always think to myself, man, that's awesome. There are people who don't agree with me, but are listening. And you know what? I think the opposite of Howard Stern. I want more of that. I love that you're here. Because I believe that, there's a path for you to maybe see some of the points that we're making here on this show and come around over time to a similar conclusion. I want to convince you. I want to get you on our side, so to speak. And I believe there's a pathway to do that. It's guys like Howard Stern, and there's plenty of them, who always claim to be part of this tolerant left, who really just hate people who disagree with them. They don't want to create a world where they try to convince you that their way is the right way, so to speak, or their way is the better way for the majority of the American population, or that their way is the best way forward for most people in the country. They just want to shame you. They want to call you stupid. They want to hate you. I mean, that's not me opining on Howard Stern's comments. That's me reading his quote. I hate the people who vote for Donald Trump. I think they are stupid. And for a guy who built a career on really appealing and entertaining the everyman, to see what hundreds of millions of dollars has done to Howard Stern is one of the most embarrassing and neutering things that you will see. The guy, Howard Stern, from 35 years ago, would hate who Howard Stern has become.
I would have thought so.
Absolutely. This is the same guy who thought that people who didn't get the vax should die, should not be allowed to work. Remember that from a couple of years ago? We talked about it. It's one thing to be a germaphobe. It's another thing to be like, hey, if you don't take this vaccine that doesn't actually prevent the spread, it isn't really a vaccine because it doesn't prevent the spread of anything, you should die. His words, Google it, Howard Stern, COVID vaccine, die. You'll find the stories. Boy, does that say a lot about that guy. And a lot about what has happened to him. The person that he appealed to, he now hates. The person who made him rich and famous, he can't stand. And that's the takeaway on the story. And the other takeaway is it's another elitist who doesn't actually want to convince people who disagree with them that, hey, maybe I've got the answers here. Or maybe my opinions are right and here's why. He doesn't want to converse. He wants to shame. He wants to ridicule. He wants to demean. And unfortunately, Howard Stern is part of a long list of people of his ilk who prefer that approach. They don't want to go back and forth. They don't want to debate policy. They just want to say you're an awful human being. And I will say this much. If Donald Trump was running a tighter ship, man, he would know how to capitalize on some of this stuff. So here's what's going on tomorrow and Friday. My friends over at the Battle Within, an incredible organization here in Kansas City that is helping veterans and first responders on their journey with PTSD. They are doing a fundraiser wiffle ball tournament the next couple of days. And it's happening at George Toma Field here in Kansas City. So at the end of the hour, we've got one spot left on this team. And if you want to play on my wiffle ball team tomorrow, well, guess what? We need another lefty on the team, by the way. So ideally, we've got a smooth swinging lefty to join me in the lineup. I'm kidding. It doesn't matter. But you can be the fifth caller, not now, but at the end of the hour. We'll let you know about that. It's at 1:30 tomorrow afternoon, by the way. So if you can't make it, don't call and be like, oh, man, I can't make it, but it sounds fun. It's like, all right, we need someone who can be in the lineup tomorrow at 1:30, okay? So we've got one spot left, and we'll give it away at the end of this hour. We've got great sponsors involved. Rex Hudler is going to be there as well. George Toma is going to be watching the game. And we'll look forward to what's going to be a good event, raising a lot of money. You don't have to, everything's covered, by the way. We got a supporter of this show who fronted the money to put our wiffle ball team in this tournament tomorrow, and it is going to be a great time, John. So looking forward to that.
Jackson County executive's not eligible, right?
Well, actually,
Frank goes from the right side of the plate anyway. So if you're looking for lefty.
Frank wanted to be on my team, but I told him I couldn't sacrifice, my own credibility
Mark's
to put him on my team.
Base coach, right?
Yeah.
right.
So I don't know if Frank's involved. Something tells me
we'll
he's
see what happens on number 5. Then.
Trying to fix the damn property taxes, but I also don't know where the Monarchs are playing tomorrow. They might be in North Dakota.
Now the season's over.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
no
you know
more
everything.
excuses for him on that. Anyway. That excuse is over.
That's
Maybe
long
Eric
gone.
Hosmer will call in.
Yeah, he
Good
could.
lefty.
Yeah.
I'll use him in the lineup. I'll take him. He'll be the second best lefty in the lineup, but I'll take him. All right. 913-408-7957. David Stokes is a few minutes away from joining us from the Show Me Institute on some of the things on the ballot on the Missouri side of the state line that is just getting overlooked as we look ahead to what's to come in this election on November 5. All right, Fluffy time. Let me bring up old Fluffster because I can't think of a better cat name than that. So this has gone viral over the last 24 hours. People have found the commentary from the Springfield, Ohio city manager from a city council meeting back in March. Now, this ties back to something David Muir said last week on the ABC debate. And he said, we talked to the city manager, and the city manager said, basically, no one's eating cats. And then this video surfaced from March, but it went viral on social media yesterday. And here is that same gentleman, the Springfield, Ohio city manager, saying this.
Laws and culture is 180 degrees different of what they're used to. And one of the things that I heard that bothered me very much, I've actually had quite a few people contact me here lately, is some pretty horrid things occurring to domesticated animals in the neighborhood. We've had some stuff in the park that, again, they're being taken advantage of for reasons other than, and if you shake your head, Brian.
No. I asked me if there was proof. I just don't have proof of it.
I
We've heard the
have
same thing.
People that have confided in me have asked me for anonymity. I can't give their names up.
I mean, we haven't seen the proof that you're talking. And I've heard about it too.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is Brian Heck, city manager, Springfield, Ohio, back in March. That clip surfaced. Now, this is not the win some people are turning it into. It's not. We have video of a city manager and people on the city council saying, hey, we've all heard this. We don't have direct evidence of it yet, but we've all heard this in this town of about 50,000 people that has had about, 20,000 Haitian migrants come into that town. And obviously that's created some issues for that community. And I say obviously because think about your neighborhood. Think about your community. If you just increased the population by 40%, there would be problems, okay? I think there would be problems. That's not a commentary on the people who are there. The vast majority are there to work and try to live the American dream, and that's an admirable thing to do. But it would create issues with schools, with available resources to the public. It would create problems. That's undeniable.
So, yeah, think about it in your neighborhood and then think, they just dropped the people at the end of the street.
Yeah.
They don't have a place, nothing. Here you go.
Got to live somewhere.
All right.
Okay.
Find your way.
That is a classic example of supply and demand. There are going to be problems for any community. Doesn't matter who they are, where they're from, there's going to be problems. But with that being said, I look at this video and I say, okay, so people have been talking about this for months. Is it still the most compelling argument for Donald Trump when it comes to the issue of illegal immigration impacting communities across America? It's not, but it does go to show you the disingenuous nature of our news media, which is very quick to make sure that their narrative is fed in a way that is very black and white. No gray area, no questioning it. And that's where, when I look back on last Tuesday, I would think to myself this. I don't think it's Trump's strongest case on the issue of illegal immigration. I think names like Laken Riley and others are much stronger examples of why the illegal immigration issue is a problem and why Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are to blame. But if you're going to bring it up, you got to know that David Muir is going to push back on you. So you've got to have some kind of tidbit and fact in your back pocket that effectively neuters them on the other end. And that's something that was lacking on Tuesday.